Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we have a special guest, Dauna Needom, who is the author of the Better to Burnout series and host of the Better to podcast. Please welcome Dauna. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So tell us a little about your story and what led you to doing what you're up to these days.
The Better To podcast started because I had once told my husband that it was better to love him and lose him than never to have loved him at all. I was a guest on a podcast where this gentleman was discussing fear. And my fear at the time was losing my husband. And of course, to talk about the ending, you usually have to talk about the beginning. So talking about Better To, I started thinking about it. It's like, well, everybody's got a Better To moment. And that kind of morphed into a podcast, which now has morphed into four different types of podcasts. Yeah, so that, and I already, without thinking about it, I already had a book series called the Better to Burnout series. So it kind of all organically came together.
Yeah. So as a guest, previous guest on that podcast, it's really nice, interesting way to sort of dissect the choices that people have made and sort of the outcomes that people had. I would be curious, you mentioned this other work, this Better to Burnout piece. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that.
The Better to Burnout series started out as, I had been working on a novel since I was in high school, so over 30 years. And when my husband went to dialysis, I started hanging out at Barnes and Noble. And while I was trying to kill time there, of course, you sit in the cafe and you start writing. And basically what happened was one of the characters that was a side character decided, hey, I got a story for you. So he's a rock star who is on his decline, and he has a coke addiction and a sex addiction, and he's basically blowing up his life. And so I started writing this as a journal, an online journal, like a blog. And I started having rehab centers follow me. And when you start having rehab centers follow you, you're like, well, wait a second, they actually believe this is real. So maybe this is a book here. And I turned it into a book. And then my second book was for a contest. And originally none of the original characters from my days with the Dark Muse was in it. And then I didn't like a line that was in the contract for the contest. So I pulled the book back and I retooled it. And while it's a standalone, Love is Worth Waiting For, it's still part of the series because some of the characters are in there. So the Better to Burnout series basically is Hollywood celebrity rock stars that have normal problems, but also have magnified of publicity, drugs, alcohol, sex, all those tropes and trappings that they deal with, plus the normal problems that we have. So
yeah, it must be a real struggle for celebrities in that they're humans just like us, and they struggle in their relationships just like us, but it's just magnified a millionfold because they're who they are, and that might not make it any easier, I'd imagine. Yes.
Well, I mean, from personal experience, not that I was in a limo once and was chased by fans because they thought we were the band, but we weren't. But anyway, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But when I was married, my first marriage, when I first got with my husband, his parents and his grandparents were like, oh, we prayed to God for you. You're so wonderful. We were everything. So in a way, it's your own celebrity there, because just like with a celebrity, we put you on a pedestal. And at a certain point, guess what? We're all human, and you can only take that pressure for so long. And how do people, not so much my situation, but in the celebrity culture, we'll use Britney Spears as an example.
Oh, yeah.
She got elevated so high so quickly. And then did they relish when she had that mental breakdown? Was everybody having a feeding frenzy? So imagine having your breakdown, but not being able to do it privately.
Yeah.
And the magnitude that puts on you and the stress that puts on you, anything we do normally, it's magnified.
Yeah. So I don't know any of that because I'm not famous in any way. But
Neither am I.
Our podcast.
I do want to pull in a sort of attached thread, right, and talk a little bit about sort of this idea of like traumatic or high impact events, right? Basically, like what you're saying with like the breakdown and whatnot that she experienced. I would be curious because I know you've had some experience with the realm of like grief and things like that. What some of the things that you've seen are, and just like sort of your journey there and what you've learned and stuff like that. I know there are lots of pieces you can fill in.
Oh, I can. I would say the most recent traumatic event that I had gone through was my husband dying. He died 3 times total, but I had picked him up from dialysis. While I knew he was on borrowed time, that's, somebody, when a doctor tells you somebody's on borrowed time, that can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 10 years. I mean, my grandmother was actually put into hospice and they kicked her out because she was doing well.
Wow.
So, and this is a woman that they were vacuuming blood out of her lungs. And she was talking to her mom, which, that's the common signs of someone's terminally ill, they're talking and they're passed out. Anyway, so I picked my husband up from dialysis and everything seems fine. And within 5-10 minutes, he collapses in the car. His lips are bluish gray and there's nothing coming back. I mean, he's talking to me 1 minute, the next minute, he seems disoriented, turns his head and collapses on me. There's trauma there because it took me, I would say the first 6 months after he left, of reliving that, having that, just sitting, doing something and all of a sudden that vision pops in your head. And I think that's one thing we don't really, I guess it depends on the person. If you're a very visual person, that memory will come back and play out in your head. And how do you move past it? That being said, when my mom shot herself, I never saw a body. I never saw anything. I had no closure. So for years, I would have dreams about her telling me she wasn't dead. Even though I knew she was dead, there was no closure. So the traumatic events, it's weird because some you relive all the time and some you don't have that closure. So even though you knew it happened, you don't know. The mind doesn't want you to say, okay, yes, it's over. It's done.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I'd be curious, what allowed you to kind of move through the grief, or is it still to the same degree to this day, or like what happened after?
It's been a journey. And the one thing I was talking to somebody the other day about, it's like when you're on that journey of grief, and I had a friend question me, she's like, why do you count the days? I'm almost 2 years out. In June will be 2 years that my husband passed. Yeah. But the whole first year, you're like, okay, it's 1 month, it's 2 months. Okay, it's their first birthday that they're not here. And my dog is barking. And so it's all these moments. And she asked me why I count. And it's like, because I've managed to get out of bed. I've managed to live my life and keep going. And the interesting thing about this is we have a life before we meet our significant other. We have that time. But when you're with somebody for 16 years and you become a caregiver, you kind of lose yourself. And you kind of lose yourself in a relationship normally. Sure. While we start liking things that they like and all those other things, we kind of lose ourselves. So then you're forced to look at your grief once you're single again and go, okay, who am I? What am I going to do? How am I going to handle my grief? And the big word that really ticks me off is the word widow. Because in a way, that label, and I know that seems kind of odd because some people think it's a badge of triumph or something, but the whole fact of the matter is it sets you up that, hey, I can scam you. You're a widow. Oh, you must be heartbroken. I can manipulate you now. And the fact of the matter is it's also on my car insurance now. It goes on your taxes. And it's like when I got divorced, I became single again. I was actually impressed because I went to the doctor's the other day and she only had 2 choices for marital status. And that was single or married. There wasn't divorce. There wasn't widowed. And I really think, honestly, that's how it should be, because you're back to who you were before. As far as your name and everything else, I mean, you can still have their married name, but I never changed my name. That was a whole nother choice and conversation, but did that answer what you wanted?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a beautiful journey of kind of rediscovering yourself. Like, I haven't ever lost a significant other to death, but everyone's been through breakups,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that was a really hard, especially when it's been, I had a 4-year relationship, and when that ended, it was extremely challenging because it's like I lived with that person, so he was like there next to me every night, and then when he wasn't, it was just like
Yeah.
weird. And in a way, I agree. I had a similar experience of just like I didn't realize how much I had lost myself in the relationship, and I had to like rediscover myself in things that I like to do. Like I stopped dancing, I stopped traveling as much, and I was like, oh, I can do that again.
Hmm.
I like it. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Not that I couldn't do it when I was in a relationship, but it was just we defaulted to just Netflix a lot. Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can sit as women, no
Mhm.
offense, but as women, we tend to play that role of people pleaser. We're told that, well, whatever they want, you should kind of go along with, and
Right.
you know, and so we kind of give up some of our own thing
Hmm.
to make things smoother.
Right. Yeah.
I would be curious on a similar note what that process of like self-discovery was like, right? And by that I mean, I can imagine there's either this path that's like things are completely different and you're kind of stumbling on things, or like there's a path that's like you had like a target and you have to reconfigure your life to get back to this target that you want, or some other path that I'm not thinking of because I've only laid out two potential things and I'm sure there are many, many more. But I'd be curious sort of what that path or evolution or just kind of transformation was like.
One of the first things I will say is a lot of people, when you lose somebody suddenly, like you were saying, your whole world changes. So your house is different and everything else. Back in 2005, we had moved into another house and he had his first heart scare. So he was rushed in, and I remember coming home and thinking, we had been in the house maybe 3 months. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this house is so big. I don't know what I'm going to do if I lose him. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to say, I'm not being insensitive. I was a nervous wreck. And every consecutive time after that, that he was rushed to the hospital for whatever reason, I would be in tears and everything else. By the time we got to where we were in 2020, I knew it was on borrowed time. My mind, because I am a writer, started writing a character that was dealing with grief.
Mm.
She was dealing with the loss of her husband. So I think part of me intuitively was already going, okay, you need to be prepared, because he'd come by the bedroom and or my office and he'd be like, hi, how you doing? And I'm like, fine. And I was bawling my eyes out because I'm typing this whole scene up. And then he'd come by, he's like, you doing okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm doing fine. He'd go back to crying. So I'm getting to your answer. So as this progresses, so when he passes, I look at my life, it's now July, and I'm like, okay, you can do two things now. You can do what you've always done in the past and eat your grief, or you can go ahead and try to get healthier, because that's what he would want. So that
Mm.
was the first step, was I'm going to lose weight. And I've lost 40 pounds since he died, and I still have more to lose, but that was
Yeah.
a step.
That's huge.
Thanks. And so then it was like, okay, I'm going to take my books and I'm going to try to really make a go of it. And so that was the next step. And then when I suggested doing podcasting, both my therapist and my primary care doctor was like, especially during COVID, this is the best thing you can do. I had the disc jockey background. So they're like, for your mental health, this is the best thing you can do, because you're not going to be isolated.
Yeah.
Because even though I was prepared, yeah, there's times when a song on the radio can make me cry, and it still can do that.
Mhm.
And there's moments, like I said, when you were looking at it going, okay. But for me, I guess the biggest target was when I decided to take my books seriously. I hired a publicist, which was a mistake, but I hired a publicist, and that publicist lit a fire under me, because she's talking about all these potential things. And that made me go, okay, well, then I need to be able to look better. I need to be able to sound better. I need to be able to be more comfortable with who I was. When I was younger, I loved to take pictures. Then after being married for so long and gaining so much weight, I didn't like the way I looked. So I had to rediscover who I was,
Mm.
and then make peace with the damage I had done while I gained all the weight and everything,
Mm.
and the aging process. So that it wasn't just only about reclaiming myself for him, it was reclaiming this new identity of the 50-year-old woman. Because when I entered this marriage, I was in my 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And being married to somebody that's legally blind, you don't have to worry about how you look.
That's true.
Which is a blessing, but it's also a curse.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was not so much that I had this target, because I'm still on this journey of self-discovery. I know what I like to eat. I know what I like to do. And it's like, I've made changes that we wouldn't have made.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried to stick with them. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah, that gives a really nice, really, really nice sort of just illustration of all the different pieces, and sort of like, you know, the way I framed it was kind of like this, like, was it this or this? And obviously it's this more complex, like beautiful tapestry of
it's kind of like everybody thinks grief is very linear, that you're going to go through the 6 stages of grief and that's going to be it, and check. And the fact of the matter is, grief is not like that at all, because there's days when you're like, hey, everything's perfect. And the next day it's just like, man, I miss them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've been, like you said, 4-year relationship, that's enough to get that, I hate to say it this way, but that's enough to have that imprint on it, that imprint of your nickname from that person, that imprint of that morning hug, or that typical morning with that person. And those are the things that you miss more than anything.
Yeah. But it sounds like you've been able to, instead of, you know, like you said, you weren't defaulting, well, maybe initially, but like eating your grief, which I think a lot of us do. I'm guilty of that. But you were able to turn it around and really kind of move through it in a very healthy way from what you described. I'd be curious though, because I know I love this idea of like, better to have loved and lost than to never have loved at all. I think that's a beautiful saying, and I absolutely 100% agree with that. But I know for a lot of people, you know, having like that great love and then losing it and they're heartbroken and they just don't want to risk their heart again anymore. Like, what would you say to them to, like, you know, encouraging them? Because it's like, it is super painful to lose someone you love, but, you know, I agree it's worth it because I know how to move through it, move through the pain and move on. But what about those people that might struggle with that idea?
There's a movie I watched, and I don't remember the name right now offhand, but there's a movie I watched. It was a Hugh Jackman movie. And the one good thing about, sometimes bad movies have really good lines. There was a Charlie Sheen movie called Terminal Velocity that said, pack your bags, you're going on a guilt trip, which is a beautiful line, I think. But anyway, this Hugh Jackman movie, this woman and him are standing there, and she's like, tell me a story with a happily ever after.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at her and he said, I'd have to tell you a story in the middle, because no story ever has a happily ever after.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. I mean, my husband and I, we had this relationship that people would stop us in the store and talk to us and say, oh, you remind me so much of such and such, and how cute we were and everything. So to go to your question, I had to say that, because to go to your question, it's like, I haven't dated. And the trolls on the internet are always fun. Oh, hi, beautiful. Okay. Yeah. Just be real. Let's be real. Let's be honest. Don't play games. And I understand, because I found myself, I mean, my husband started making me clean out his stuff before he died, but I found myself one day cleaning out his closet. And this was, I guess, 3 months in. And I said to him, you know, I'm cleaning out some of his stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, so do you want to get in a relationship again? Because you could very well be in the same situation again. Do you want to go through this again? And, you know, 2 years now, going on 2 years, I think, sure. You know, because the thing is, life without a partner is a weird thing. Because there's those moments that you have that you're super excited about. And I mean, if something major happened, I would always run downstairs and be like, honey, guess what? And now it's like, I can tell my dog, she's not going to care. I can tell my cat, she's not going to care. But, you know, so is it worth the risk? And I had a friend once tell me there are no memories without the risk. And that's the truth. It's like, there are no memories. So do I say jump in? Well, I can't say that. Have I signed up to a dating site? No, and I will not sign up to a dating site. But would I be open to a relationship? Sure, because you never know what potential future could hold. And it's better to at least try to explore it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
That's true. Yeah, beautifully said.
I mean, there was 10 years between my first marriage and my second marriage, and I got to know me. And I will go back to him telling me, my second husband saying, well, I'm going to die. I'm like, well, it's better to love you and lose you. That's where that conversation came from. And we had 16 years together. So no matter what, somebody could, and this is what I always tell people, you don't know that somebody's not going to get in a car accident tomorrow. So you need to appreciate who you have in your life.
Right. Although I think I don't know if I'm playing the devil's advocate, because I feel like there's like this delicate balance, because I think we all need that time to ourselves to be single and discover ourselves.
Mhm.
But also there's like the grand joy of enhanced life with a partner, and there's beauty in that, and discovering each other and learning to communicate and connect and have that authentic connection. But I'm like, obviously I'm not just gonna like break up with my husband because I just want to be single for a little bit.
No.
But I like, so there's days where I miss it, and I like, oh, I could do it. I mean, I could technically still do whatever I want, but there were times where I did really enjoy being single, and then there's times I really enjoy being married. And it's this like dichotomy of, I think it's good to have both experience, because I know some people are just perpetually single. They're like refuse to even put their heart out there, even try or be open to it. And then there's the people that just jump from relationship to relationship to relationship without any like space between. So I have no idea where I was going with that, but I just wanted to make that point.
No, I completely
Yeah.
understand. I completely get it, because I look at my relationship at a certain point. Before he started dialysis, there was like several years where my husband and I were together 24/7 for the most part. And I mean, that says a lot about a couple if you can handle each
a lot
other
of
that
time
much.
together. Yeah.
And that was before COVID.
Mhm.
So when he started dialysis, that was different. And during the last couple of years, as I started building my writing career even more, because I've been writing since high school, we dissected. He would go watch Rick and Morty or go watch something else, and I would be writing.
Mhm.
And I'm now to the point, it's like when I look at putting a relationship into my life, it's like, with all the other stuff I'm doing, do I have space for that person?
Mhm.
And I look at it, and this, I guess, goes back to kind of the healing thing. I'm not willing to give up everything I'm doing for somebody else now.
Good. Yeah.
And that takes age, that takes, I guess, wisdom, that takes, I want to be my own person. And one of my friends said, you realize if your husband was still alive, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. And I think that's the trade-off. It's like, now that I've gotten here,
Mhm.
I don't necessarily want to go, okay, here, I'm going to quit everything and be your support system.
Mhm.
I will be part of your life and you can be part of my life, but we're two separate people that come together and support each other.
Yeah.
And the one gift I will say that I got from my husband, and I'll say this real quick, is we learned to communicate. We learned the whole fact that if one of us was upset, we knew to stop and leave the room and then come back, because especially when you're dealing with somebody with health issues,
Mhm.
they're mad at their body for betraying them and they will lash out.
Mhm.
And if you step away and then come back, usually you get to the truth and there's an apology there going, I'm sorry, it wasn't you.
Yeah.
And I think we don't always see that. We just immediately, somebody comes at us, we're going to go right back at them.
Mhm.
So it takes a lot to learn that.
So there are a bunch of different angles. Let's see how many pieces I can remember in one go.
Sorry.
One of the things that sort of came to mind as the both of you were talking, I think, it's really important, or at least I have seen that it's really important in relationship or out of a relationship, being really clear, like you were talking about, on what it is, like how the relationship fits into your life, right? Because I feel like there are people for who being single perpetually is actually something that works for them, but it really depends if, or the opposite, right? Like serial getting in and out of relationships can work, but in general, when you see these patterns, the relationship that they actually have with relationships is a little tenuous, right? So if someone is perpetually single because they're afraid to go out and take a chance, then that's maybe something to look at. But if someone is perpetually single because they're like, I don't want to share my house with someone. I don't want, like, I like having my own house. I like having most of my time to myself. Anyway, that's like one of the pieces that kind of stood out to me. Another thing that I wanted to tackle or ask you is, it sounds like you have recently really unlocked like a lot of your creative energy or put a lot of time into these creative pursuits. And I remember you mentioned earlier sort of that you had spent some time, like working on the novel or whatnot. I'm curious if you think this is, if there could have been space for you to pursue that more, right? And I don't know, this is a hypothetical, so maybe it's not a very good question, but, or if you really needed like this reconfiguration in your life. I guess what I'm saying is like, do you feel like this opened up the window for you to see like, okay, here's all the things that I need to do to pursue this dream? Or if it was, as opposed to like the window to see the path, you actually needed the space and time to like, I already knew the path. I just needed time to be able to actually do it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. As far as the writing goes, like I said, I've been writing since I was 30. And because of being at Barnes, I ended up knowing the staff. So they were closing that location. And there's a reason why I'm saying this. So they're closing this location. And yes, I've been like, oh, I'm a writer, never published anything, kept dragging my feet. And my friend's like, well, we're having a new writer's night. It'll be the last new writer's night. You can participate. It's a book signing. Oh, okay. Light the fire under me. Let's go. My husband used to joke that you're never going to get another book done before I'm dead. You're never going to get that done. And he would let me read to him. I would read some of my stories, and especially days he liked the character because he thought I'm living vicariously. Back to your question, though, about what I'm doing now. When I became a disc jockey, it was because I won a pizza off the radio. Okay. I had no desire to be a disc jockey. I met the disc jockey at the mall where he was working, and lo and behold, we became friends, and he brought me into the station, and I felt like my life was stagnating. August of 1993. And so he's like, come on, bring the kids up to this, because I had 2 stepkids, bring the kids up to the station and I'll teach you how to program it. I learned how to program it. And after that, in August of 93 is when I became a jock. So this was about June. I came back from vacation, said my life was stagnating, and boom, he's like, my boss wants to interview you. Okay. I did the interview on Tuesday. I was hired on Friday and on air by Friday. Fast forward to where we are now. It's like, I had that backing. I wanted to do a podcast with my husband. He didn't want to do it. I did an interview for some podcast, and they were like, we have a radio show you could do. My guy who does my sound is like, I have a mic you can use. And then slowly but surely it morphed into a podcast. So it wasn't, I would say the strength came to do the podcast because I talked about my grief. It was always there in the back of my head, but it wasn't something that was naturally calling to me. Writing, I love it. And I do love podcasting now because that's why I've started 3 other shows. But at the time, it was just kind of like, I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing. But I'm 100 episodes through now, and it's like, yeah, okay, I like this.
Nice.
But was it this unfolding map? Maybe, but the problem is I still don't know where the map leads. That's the problem. There's still the big question mark of where am I going? And the other caveat about grief is I'm looking at now I have to sell my house. So it's like, where am I going after that? And those are the things we don't talk about when we talk about grief, because you're suddenly, not only are you losing your spouse, 10 to 1, you're going to lose your house as well. And so where does your life go? So that's kind of now where I'm at on my journey with the grief thing. It's like, I've settled this, and I realize that the hardest moment most likely will be when I go downstairs to lock the door for the last time, because that closes that chapter of my life. Did that answer your question? Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what the question was. The question was so rambling and whatnot, and what you said was nice. So absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, I can imagine that last, when you have to leave your house, that's going to be I can't imagine how hard that must be, because so many memories are shared.
Yeah, I can't either. I mean, it's one thing where this is the place you live together, and you're now closing that door. And granted, he's coming with, because I have his ashes, but it's still one of those things where it's like, the memory is not, I mean, the memories come with you, but it's different.
Yeah.
This is something you created with that person.
Right. Although there is that, you know, the grief of losing something that you shared together, but is there any like excitement of, you know, oh, I get to create a new fresh start, or what is that occurring, or maybe it's not, or it's not a problem if it's not, but just curious.
You know, it's funny because I've moved several times in my life.
Mhm.
I picked up stuff and moved, and I've been in
Yeah.
Chicago for roughly close to 30 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself going, am I staying in Chicago or am I moving out of state? And what used to be exciting is now, because it's different, because now it's like, well, I have to decide how much stuff I'm taking, what am I getting rid of, you know, and then that opens up the whole caveat of like running across his high school diploma and running across a picture of him and his first fiance, his life prior to me. We don't have children. He doesn't have children. So how do you respect the memory without and not disrespect the memory, but what do you really need? You know, what do you take? And it's not just that kind of stuff, but that is part of it, because he had a whole life before me. But who gets that? So that's the other side of this, is now it's like, what is your own mortality? What do you start looking at your own stuff, and what do you need to carry forward in your own life? You know, I'm at that midway mark. So what do I do? Where am I going? And as exciting as it is, it's also terrifying because I'm not doing it with anybody.
Right.
So, you know, it's a little unnerving.
That's understandable. Would be unnerving. I actually, when I had broken up with that previous relationship before my current one, of the one that was 4 years, I decided, because I was in Southern Maryland, and I was like, I do not want to just be in Southern Maryland if I don't have a reason to be in Southern Maryland. So I decided, yes, I want to move, and I decided to move back to California to be near my family, because that's where I grew up, and it made sense. But ultimately, you know, I had to wrap up my business, which was like an 8-month process. I had to close off my office. And so in that in between time, that transition phase, I ended up, you know, dating more for fun. That's actually where I met my husband, my current husband, because on the East Coast. And then I also met some like it kind of pushed me to connect with other women more and like make more women friends. And I got really connected and close to like my girl group. We call ourselves the Powerful Queens. and
Nice.
It was just like, I hadn't had that in Maryland before, because I was just focused on like, oh, my relationship, we'd stay in most of the time. And it was just so challenging in a way, because I was like, initially when I broke up, I was like, I'm ready to get out of here. I don't need to be here, but it's going to be a while. And I found myself taking time to rediscover myself, travel, meet new friends, date, have fun, learn what I like to do. And it was fun and exciting. And at the same time, like by the time I was actually moving, it was actually very hard to leave at that point, because I had built this new life outside of that relationship I had there. And so it was just kind of a catch 22 situation. But I'm happy I still moved, because I love being near my family.
The funny thing is, before I met my husband, we were friends, and I had an opportunity to move out to California as well. And he asked me, he's like, why do you want to move out there? And I'm like, because I do.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I didn't.
Oh.
But now I find myself looking at that same scenario. It's like, I have friends out there now. So could that be on the plate? But then I have this whole community here, not where I live at currently, but I have friends that live here, and I know the internet and everything is easy now. It's not like moving when I did before.
Yeah.
When I moved from, New Orleans to here, it was like, there you go. And long distance wasn't cheap. So now it's like, where are you going? That's the biggest thing, is the unknown. It's like I said, I don't have the X on the map. I don't have that part. And that's the unnerving, unsettling thing. It's like, I've been through enough now. Just give me my little X so I can figure it out and move on.
Follow up on that. do you find that navigating this sort of uncertainty is helped by sort of some of the stuff you've done in the past, in terms of, obviously the situation is very different, but things like pushing forward to like start a podcast or pushing forward to work with a publisher and get a book published? Do you find that managing some of that uncertainty, like you use any of the same tactics or anything, or are they just completely uncorrelated?
Completely different. And I mean, it was the publicist I had worked with. The publishing, I had already done everything. And the publicist was a different entity. And that was a valuable lesson because it taught me who to trust and who not to trust. But I think moving is a completely different beast. And yes, I should be comfortable. And I get after myself because you should be comfortable. You've done this before. I mean, I literally came up here for a visit, flew back to New Orleans, packed up my car, said goodbye to everybody in like 4 days, drove from New Orleans to here and got here at 2:00 in the morning, all within a week. But that person is so far removed from who I am now. That was when I was 27. At 27, you don't think about those things. At 54, you sit here and go, well, what about security? What about a house? What are you doing to, those are all things that come into play because it's the uncertainty. I think when you're younger, you have that whole potential of the world is wide open. I can do whatever. And when you hit 50, you're like, wait a second. So now I got to change doctors. I got to do this. All the mundane adult stuff is now in your face. And you're like, really? Do I have to? So I think that's where you kind of get, it's not so much that you can't really compare the two, because clicking the link to publish your book is a lot easier than going, okay, I have to go through my whole house and decide what I'm keeping and where I'm going. It's tough.
Yeah, I don't know why I asked that question, because at a minor level, I'm doing the same thing. I have published a book. I am trying to decide where I want to live right now. And I'm like, publishing the book was easy. Like, it's just out in the world, and if people want to read it, they can. Where I'm going to live? Well, exactly. This place has this, and this place has that, and this place, this is good, this is bad. I can't live next to my family and on the West Coast, and like, so no, not because I think it was a terrible question, but because I have lived experience of almost the exact same thing, and it did not. Publishing my book has not helped inform me in any way whatsoever about where it would be nicest to live.
Do you think, though, maybe you asked because you were hoping that I could give you the answer to make you feel a little calmer?
Yeah, if you could just tell me where to live, I'll wait till you figure it out, and then I'll ask again.
The funny thing is, because I read cards as well and stuff, and if I had to say one place that has constantly come up lately, it is California, and it's not that it's like if I did that, that would be insane. I just look at that. It's like moving to California is just, it's crazy. But the thought is there.
Taxes or because of something else?
Well, no, because I mean, taxes in Illinois are just as crazy, and our gas prices aren't as bad. But it's
almost $6 here. It's ridiculous.
I live in one of the highest property taxes. Cook County's worse, but our property tax in Illinois is crazy. Wow. So it's just a myriad of things. It's like, what do I want to do? But I know there's opportunities out there to do what I want to do. That's true. I write about it all the time. I mean, most of my books are set in LA.
Well, this conversation has made me appreciate that I'm settled, and I don't plan to move anytime soon, because I have moved so many times myself, from Seattle to Maryland to Virginia to California, that I am tired of moving, and I don't plan to move anytime soon. So I'm thankful for that. But yeah, Donovan has been a bit of a nomad since we started this podcast 2 years ago, and it's fun to hear his stories and his journey of discovering that.
Donovan, I understand. I went from New Orleans to Shreveport to Dallas to Indiana to Chicago to New Orleans to back to Chicago, and then live several places in Chicago. So I understand.
Yeah, he's been there.
Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt.
That's right. Yes. All right. Well, Donna, it's been such a pleasure to have you on our show. Is there anything else you'd like to share or plug before we wrap up today?
I'll plug my books. This is My Days with the Dark Muse, which is a gritty, dark book written in a guy's point of view. And then this is a romantic suspense, second chance romance, set in Hollywood. So they're both available on Amazon. And I have the B2D2 podcast, which is a live podcast on Saturdays. There is a music podcast called B2 Soundtrack of Our Lives, where I take a guest and we discuss their favorite songs that have meant something to them. And of course, there's the Better Two podcast, which Donovan has been on. And also the Better Two Weekly Intuitive podcast, which is where I do an intuitive reading for the week. So that's basically me.
Awesome. So a lot of fun resources and content that you have out there. So we're gonna put your link in the description so people can access your link tree and get all the links to all those things that you just described.
Thank you.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you again for just being on our show. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yes. And thank you everyone for tuning in this week. We appreciate you as always. And if you appreciate us, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all the things that spread a little more happiness in the world. Thank you everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to subscribe, as it really helps out a lot. If you're looking for more content, there's all sorts of information over at howtohappy.com. And if you want something a little bit more condensed and concise, I've also written the book Mindscaping, which is essentially a framework for optimizing happiness. So we'll have the link there as well. And that's all I've got. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.